And now we're going to go to Ann Campbell, Superintendent of San Mateo County Office of Education. I have a question for you before I hand you the microphone. So in your literature, you talked about creating 21st century global citizens. What did you mean by that, and how will we know that we got there?
Great question. What I meant by that was that we are creating exactly the kind of individual that you've all described in the various comments that you provided to Bernie, that we have individuals who have good, solid academic skills, but they have the critical thinking skills, the creative skills, the collaborative skills to be able to use that knowledge in new ways. That they are people who are adaptable, they are resilient, and they are moving the world forward in a positive way. So that's what I look upon as a global citizen. I find some irony that we're here in the year 2011 and we're talking about what 21st century schools should be like, and 10% of the 21st century is done. So, however, this is work that I've been doing for a while, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And I was thinking, as Mike was talking about testing and what's happening right now with the Common Core standards and potentially new forms of assessment, I first became a superintendent in 1997, and I very firmly remember going to a faculty meeting at one of our elementary schools and explaining the whole No Child Left Behind test-taking accountability index that was going to go up. And the school where I was actually was a school that was based on the visual and performing arts, and they were teaching the core academic subjects through visual and performing arts. And that staff of 30 teachers looked at me like I had absolutely and completely lost my mind, that they were going to be measured by this one number, and that was that. And as I think we've all lived through the last 15 years, indeed, that is what has come to pass. And so it's really wonderful to know that the bills are being sponsored in Sacramento, in the Assembly and the Senate. It's great to know the work that the P21 Collaborative is working on both nationally and in California, because the pendulum has gone way, way too far this way, and it's nice to see it coming back. I would just like to comment on a couple of things as I think about where we go in the 21st century. One is that I think we need an education to pay a lot more attention to what we're learning about how the human brain learns. And I think one of the most fundamental and important pieces of information is we know that 90% of an individual's brain power basically develops in the first 6 years of life. And yet we don't legislate that kids come to school until they get to be 5, 5.5, 6 years old. And so I would say, in addition to kindergarten through 12th grade through 14th through college, we also need to be investing very, very heavily in early childhood education and early care for kids. They need quality care. They need the opportunity to have educational experiences in a group setting. A child from a lower economic, social setting basically arrives in kindergarten with a third of the vocabulary of a student who has been in an early childhood setting. So I really would fundamentally think that that needs to be added to the equation as well as we think about 21st century education. But I thought I would share with you today just a couple of examples of things that are going on in San Mateo County as those of us who are actually the practitioners in education are trying to put 21st century education to work. And I thought I'd talk a little bit at the school site level and then at the district level and leave you with a question at the policy level. So if I think about it at the school site level, I had the good fortune a couple of weeks ago to the Bayside STEM Academy, which is in the San Mateo Foster City School District. It's a school that is traditionally in that school district been one of the lowest performing schools, is situated in a neighborhood with very, very low socioeconomic demographics. However, that school is making a tremendous difference for their students, and they are focusing on the core content areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. They're teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, those wonderful middle schoolers that we know well, through a thematic approach to STEM subjects, and there's a very definite progression that the kids go through in their 3 years there. But they're doing things such as, in 7th grade, they're learning about the 7 ancient wonders of the world, and they're taking information about that historically and economically, as well as from an engineering perspective, and understanding those, and then they're coming up with the 7 wonders of the modern world, and what are those? And interestingly enough, those aren't buildings. They're things like the World Wide Web or Facebook or things of that nature as well. They have a debate group that stems out of one of their elective classes that's called The Games That People Play. And the kids are learning the skills of debate. So they're getting the core academic communication skills that they need, but then they're asking and answering questions from both sides because they're good debaters of different topics that they're given. And one of the ones that they most recently did their debate on was the merits of Facebook. And as you can well imagine, there's pluses and minuses to that. And as a debater, you have to be prepared to debate either side of that. But that's an excellent example of how 21st century skills are at work. I also had the opportunity to visit a robotics class, and the kids were learning to program a robot so that it could, you would put a square, a meter square basically, and the robot had to be programmed to be able to navigate around that meter square. Only one group out of the 6 or 7 groups was able to do that. They got the prize of, and it happened to be for my Rotary Club actually, of when the Rotary Club came to visit their school, they had to get us somehow to make a robot move. And so they came up with their robot and they set it at the edge of the table, and then they just looked at it and said, okay, make it move. And we all sat there. And eventually one person, and I don't know what caused this person to do it, clapped their hand, and the robot sort of went rrr, 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 and stopped. And then somebody else realized, okay, let's a couple of us clap. And so they did, and it went rrr, 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 rrr. And then we all started clapping, and it went speeding down the table. But those are the exact kinds of experiences that a 21st century education looks like. I'd also like to talk systemically for a second at the district-wide level, and Wendy Tukloff is here from the Pacifica School District. She is their superintendent. This is her first year in Pacifica, and she has launched together with her school board as well as the Educational Foundation in Pacifica a 21st century educational strategic plan. And they are basing their strategic plan on 4 cornerstones that include a rigorous curriculum, being very capable as far as digital skills are concerned, being good communicators, and also being creative and being healthy. And so they are now at the point they have a 21st century mentor teacher that they are starting to work with their school staffs to really together develop what that looks like in reality. I also just, personally, when I was in Portola Valley, we worked on this idea as well, and we came up with something that we called investigative learning. And if you think of the slide that Bernie showed of the school where it was basically project learning based, investigative learning is very similar to that. It uses the principles of design thinking and has kids, no matter whether they're in kindergarten or 8th grade, begin to answer questions so that they are totally engaged in what they're doing. And my favorite one actually was one of our 3rd grade classes decided that they really wanted to spend 6 weeks on chocolate. And I have to say that that was one of my favorite activities because I got to go in and learn along with them. But they learned all about where chocolate comes from, different ways of making recipes with chocolate, just oodles and oodles of different things about it and how to use it in different ways as well. But they were highly engaged in that. They were learning their math, they were learning science, they were learning social studies, but it was coming through that thematic type of experience. And then I would just use one other quick example, and that's in the high school world today. I think we tend to think of high school as very focused on passing the KC exam. There's a lot going on right now in career technical education that's saying that absolutely kids need to have the strong academic rigor to be successful, but they also need to have technical skills and they need to have real-world work experience while they're in high school and in community college as well in those first couple of years of college, because that keeps them very engaged in their education and ultimately ends up with people going out into society and being productive and thriving as citizens of the 21st century. My question I would leave you with is, that's a lot of talk about things at the school site level and at the school district level. And what's fascinating to me, having lived through No Child Left Behind and the academic accountability movement of the last 15 years, that was all established at a very high policy level. And the one thing that I get concerned about when I think about P21 is if you legislate this at the policy level and you tend to make it it tends to, for whatever reason, become very rigid and very codified, and we all have to march to the same drummer. That is not what the 21st century is all about. And we as a society have to figure out a way that we can be flexible, that we can be resilient, that we can be nimble, that we don't all have to do things exactly the same way, and yet using our professional expertise and our deep belief system, we are able at the local level to translate that policy into reality for our kids in ways that make sense for our local communities. So that would be my 2 cents worth for the afternoon.